It's finally here. I spent way too much time in gold perfecting this build for you guys, but man oh man are the results amazing. This is me standing still and letting enemies attack me in a tier 15 waystone. We have thousands of life, thousands of energy shield, and we're still doing insane damage. In this video, I'm going to break down every single thing you need to know about this build in very thorough detail. But first, if you like my content, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps the channel, and I definitely appreciate it. I'm also live right now at twitch.tv/screamheart. Now let's get into it. First off, the most important thing, look at my character. We now look like an actual battle mage, which is pretty cool. I also took the time to design a nice little hideout here. I don't know if you guys have spent any time messing with it, but man, oh man, did I go all out. If I go to my edit here, you guys can see all this grass, all these trees, all of this I designed. So yeah, needed a appropriate hideout to go with the character. Anyways, for the character itself and the actual build, if you haven't seen it before, we are using Hammer of the Gods in a way that other builds can't do. We're able to cast it. We're able to cast it. We're able to cast it. We can just keep on casting it. And keep on casting it. And eventually get to a cooldown. But you can see this is the strongest skill in the game, and we're able to spam it constantly. Now, if we look at my skill gems, you can look at Hammer of the Gods. It's got 107,000 DPS here, and that's with deep cuts in there. And we also have momentum, which isn't even increasing the damage visually on the DPS here, but we basically always benefit from this. So it's a huge amount of damage, and we can drop that thing like a nuke on any enemies that we deem worthy. For the large majority of enemies, especially smaller trash mobs, we're going to be leap slamming onto them. And then after we hit them, if they're primed for stun, which you'll be able to tell by a little white circle on their heads, then we're going to bone shatter, which is a little swirly attack here, and that's going to finish them off. I have almost never seen an enemy survive a bone shatter. Even rare mobs that are in a group of enemies will almost always die when we bone shatter. So very good, and it actually allows you to do a different strat than using Hammer of the Gods, which is to pull enemies onto the rare mob and then jump onto them and bone shatter and kill the rare mob instantly. This sometimes is the safer option depending on the rare mob. But primarily, Hammer of the Gods is going to be used for rare mobs and bosses, Leap Slam and Bone Shatter combo for everything else. We can Seismic Cry before using our Hammer of the Gods, and that's going to buff our hammer to do even more damage. And if you happen to Seismic Cry on a heavy stunned enemy, especially on bosses, this is really good, then you get a guaranteed aftershock on the Hammer of the Gods, and that's going to make you do twice as much damage. Then we have Ancestral Warrior Totem, which is going to be dropping down Earthquakes. This is mostly for the Jagged Ground in the endgame variant of this build, but this can also put out a decent amount of damage and help with stun buildup, that type of thing, so it's good to put down if you're not feeling lazy at the time. I've got Shield Charge in here. I haven't actually started using this in my build, but I think I'm going to, just for the mobility aspect of it. But I mostly use this as a way to hold my overpower, because whenever I have a map that happens to have increased stun threshold on enemies, then I like to put overpower onto my leap slam. So it's nice to have it just here so I don't have to have it in my inventory awkwardly. We're using Berserk in order to get extra damage from rage, and we're also getting life leech, so this is pretty nice. Herald of Ash is causing us to ignite enemies when we do overkill damage, which we basically always do. And then we have Overwhelming Presence, which helps us build up stun. I would say that none of these are super required to the build, but they are all handy to have, so basically just fit what you can in here. Same thing with the support gems. Clarity's a nice to have, and there's some other ones that I have in the written guide that are also kind of nice to have. I got off on a little bit of a tangent there, but our Time Snap is what's allowing us to reset the cooldown of our Hammer of the Gods. We're using Ingenuity, which has increased cooldown reduction, and we're using Second Wind, which allows us to use this twice. Now, if you just like spamming hammers, it is kind of nice to put Second Wind onto the hammer itself, but this is the best setup if you are doing the Leap Slam and Bone Shatter combo, which is what I've come to prefer, because then we can save our hammers for the important stuff, and we'll have multiple hammers to be able to use during that time, but it just depends what you're trying to do. I do think that Second Wind on the hammer is technically a little better for bossing, but it's not a big enough difference to stress about, so do whichever way you like it. And Mace Strike is kind of just our fallback. If we happen to have everything on cooldown, or we just have a single enemy we want to kill real quick, we can just smack it a couple times. It's probably gonna inflict poison and you know, corrosion for the armor. This is nice to weave in between using hammers on bosses, that kind of thing. Now, for a passive skill tree, we're starting up at the top because we're a sorceress, but we're eventually going to make our way down to the bottom left of the tree because we want to pick up Giant's Blood, and we also want to get some bonuses that are nice for melee abilities. If we look here, you can see that I've gone pretty heavily into Energy Shield, and the reason for that is because one-shots in this game are the most frustrating aspect of the game. If you die, your map is over. You have to start completely fresh. I have 2,865 life and 4,564 shield. This is actually on the lower side than what I had before, and you could go really heavily into this and go for even more. There's some spots like this one here, only takes 4 points to get another 20% maximum, as well as some other smaller maximum. There's even some more up this way if you really wanted to go into it. But basically, Energy Shield is extremely strong, and we don't have to go super far in order to get the benefit from it. This also solves the problem of the wasted points at the beginning of our tree. We no longer have 25 points before we make any benefit from them. If you're looking for some points to cut out and put into offensive stuff later, you could always take out some maximum out of these points here, because I don't think the maximum is as important. As long as you're not getting one shot, that's the main concern. I think the recharge rate is extremely useful. Stun threshold from Energy Shield's extremely useful. Faster start of recharge, all of those things are extremely useful. And you also get a lot of intelligence from these different nodes over here, and that intelligence is going to help you meet your stat requirements. Moving over this way, I went for this one because it gives a little bit of dex, but it also gives attack speed. And I feel like I'm constantly just wanting more attack speed whenever I'm trying to optimize my build, because the faster you move, the less likely it is enemies are going to hit you. So when you leap slam onto a group of enemies, if you're able to attack them and kill them before they can even get a single hit on you, then you're just not going to get stunned. So extremely useful to have more attack speed. So I'm definitely going for it where I can. Optionally, you could opt for damage or survivability, but I think this is multi-purpose to both offensive and defensive. So this gem here, I'm sure you guys are questioning, what is this? This is something I was experimenting with, and it just seemed like a really cool idea. So I pathed up here, I got this node, and what this does, it allows you to put passives in that are not connected to your board. And I got this in a perfect spot where I can get all 3 of these damage nodes up here, which are 25% each, and even one of these is in my other circle for 3% bleed duration. So that's 75% damage I got from putting this on. Of course, I lost some elemental resist and chaos resist, but I'm not really hurting on it too much. I lost a little bit of lightning that I needed, but for the most part, it didn't have an effect. We'll see exactly how that pans out later. I wouldn't worry about these as much. Focus on the points and getting some basic gems. But that's a cool idea if you want to use it, and definitely think it's worth it for me right now. Moving up further this way, I've got this time lost ruby that gives me bleed chance and bleed duration. I'd probably rather have bleed magnitude instead of the bleed duration. But either way, this helps build into the bleed aspect of the build, and I have a lot of nodes over here that are in range to benefit that. Moving down this way, this is a pretty cool node. It gives you 20 energy shield when you block. So a lot of times I actually have my energy shield just sitting in the same spot if it's smaller enemies attacking me. So it's very nice to have that. But it's also giving you recharge rate and faster start of energy shield recharge, which we really like. There's also another node over here that's kind of synergizing with that, where you get 20 life on block. That one I didn't prioritize as much, and you can see I currently don't have it on. But that is an option to meet your block chance, and it's about the same amount of distance as traveling for these other nodes. I currently am going down this path because I need the strength to meet my requirements, and this is pretty much the best place to get strength in the entire tree. We're getting more bleed chance here, and jagged ground is causing enemies to take 10% increased damage, which is basically like a more multiplier as far as I understand. And again, I'm so short on strength that I actually grabbed these 3 nodes here. So a lot of optimization that I can do in my build personally. I'm grabbing my aftershock chances here, but unfortunately I'm 3 points short, which is where that strength could go if I had it, in order to get the 20% more damage against heavy stun enemies. So I definitely want that, but right now I just can't make the points. And I also am not getting my unnatural resilience right now, or additional points here for the Prism Guard. So there's definitely a lot of places that I'd like to optimize my particular build. But on the written guide on Mobalytics, I've got the easy setup, which has kind of like the priority first go-to nodes. And then I also have the endgame setup, which is like the more optimized version of it. So definitely take a look at the Mobalytics and you guys can see the exact stuff you should run. As far as jewels go, this is probably the best jewel I have. Rage on hit is nice. Chance to bleed is nice. Block chance is very nice. I would prioritize probably the block chance, chance to bleed, and bleed magnitude. Oh yeah, this one also has bleed magnitude. But yeah, those three are the most important. Rage on hit is just a nice to have. Gives you a little extra damage that you can stack up as you're going. But we're not actually investing into things like Unforgiving to increase the duration of rage. So it's actually not going to really sustain itself. And that's something you could do if you wanted to. It might be worth it. Maybe that's a better choice than possibly some of the defensive nodes if you feel like you're overly defensive. Make sure you adjust for what you need. All right, moving on to gear. Oh, whoops, I've got a random divine orb in my inventory. So your weapon, this is going to be probably the most difficult thing to figure out. And it's because you are trying to meet your requirements. So if you saw the early game setup or the easy setup on Mobalytics, we have the Vertex Helm, which cuts your requirements on weapons in half. That makes it much easier to find a two-handed weapon. So if you're struggling to find a good weapon or you just can't meet your requirements, don't worry, use the Vertex. It's not going to be the end of the world because Vertex and Ghostwraith works perfectly fine. I think this is the better combo because you're also getting some rarity of items found and you're going to maintain more of your maximum life, which means you have more to pull from for using life for skills. It also means you have a little bit more of a safety net there and more stun thresholds. So I prefer this setup, but the Ghostwraith and Vertex setup works fine. But anyways, for your weapon, you're looking for as much physical damage as possible. You're also looking for reduced attribute requirements preferably, but it really just depends. When you search for items on trade, just look for strength requirement because at the end of the day, the strength requirement is what matters the most. So a lower level weapon with better stats might be a better choice. And the most important thing on here probably is, after the fact that you can actually wear the weapon, is the ranks to melee skills or level of melee skills. So I only have +4 on here. That's actually pretty bad because 7 is the highest. I would recommend shooting for 4 or higher. 5 is probably the sweet spot of where you can find something that's actually within a reasonable price range. But, depending on what you need, sometimes you're going to end up with less. As far as your shield goes, you're going to want as much increased block chance as you can get because that's less points you have to put in your passive tree or less stats that you need on your jewels in order to hit your 75%. Don't forget that block chance is also scaling our damage. And other than that, this is mostly just a stat stick. I've got a huge amount of maximum life on it, a bunch of resistances, definitely useful for filling the gaps in your build. On your amulet, you're gonna want rarity of items found, obviously, but +3 melee skills, or at least a +2. I'd say +2 is the sweet spot. +3 is the reach goal. And honestly, it might be more worth it to have a +2 and get way better of everything else because I don't have hardly any resistances on this. So yeah, it's kind of a trade-off. As far as what I allocated, I put Lay Siege because that's going to give us an extra 1% damage per block chance. So that's really good. For our rings, we want physical damage, rarity of items found, and then as much resistances as possible, basically. Maximum life is always something good to get, but unfortunately, I did not get much of that on either of my rings. If you're wondering how I have so much spirit, I have +23 enchanted on my helmet with the corruption. So, you don't worry about it if you don't get that much because you don't really need all of those spirit gems. On the boots, movement speed is the only thing that you really need to focus on, but as with any item, rarity of items found is very good, and fill in holes with your resists and max life. 35% is the highest movement speed you can get. Mine is only 30, but shoot for whatever you can. I would say if you don't have higher than 25%, you're doing something wrong. The chest piece here is kind of interesting. So I went for this because it has 42% faster start of energy shield recharge. And I thought that was super OP because when you're in the middle of a pack of enemies and your energy shield's just gone, being able to dodge roll away a couple of times and have your energy shield shoot up to you know, half or full is extremely useful. So I went for this for that reason. It also gives a lot of extra maximum energy shield, lots of maximum life. I went for the reduced attribute requirements here because not having to have as much int means that's more points we can put into strength, and that means less requirements that we have to reduce on our weapon. So definitely useful to have that here. And you can see I got plus 29 intelligence, which, you know, it's just a bonus. For the belt, I mostly wanted this for the maximum life and the charm slots. Having 3 charm slots is very useful. For one, you can get rarity of items found, which is very nice. And I think that anti-freeze and anti-stun are not required, but these feel pretty damn useful. Almost every death that I've had could be attributed to stun or freeze. The few exceptions is me just standing in a pile of, you know, crazy AoE elemental damage or something like that, or standing next to something that exploded. But I don't even know if standing next to something that exploded would kill me these days with how much energy shield I have. But yeah, I think these two are the most important. For the gloves, we're going for, again, plus to melee skills. You can technically get a +1 corrupted level of melee skills, which is pretty nice if you can get that. I had a pair, but I opted for the rarity of items found and then sold that pair for more than these gloves are worth. And that's about it for the itemization. I have experimented with trying to run 2 two-handed weapons in my swap hand for my hammer, but every time I've done that, it's always been less damage. So I don't know exactly how that's supposed to work, but it doesn't seem like it works well. Now let's go through these gems one at a time so you can see what they all are. I've got Close Combat, Heft, Envenom, Deadly Poison, and Corrosion on my Mace Strike. I've got Ingenuity, Second Wind, Wind Wave, Arcane Tempo, and Inspiration on my Time Snap. I have Brutality, Concentrated Effect, Heavy Swing, Momentum, and Deep Cuts on my Hammer of the Gods. On my Leap Slam, I've got Martial Tempo, Holy Descent, Rage, Life Tap, and Jagged Ground. On my Bone Shatter, I've got Impact Shockwave, Devastate, Magnified Effect, Rupture, and Soul Thief. On my Seismic Cry, I've got Premeditation, Raging Cry, Enraged War Cry, and Dazing Cry. On my Ancestral Warrior Totem, I've got Earthquake, Ancestral Urgency, Splinter, and Demolisher. On my Shield Charge, I've got Stomping Ground, Overpower, and Physical Mastery. On my Berserk, I've got Cannibalism and Clarity. On my Herald of Ash, I've got Fire Mastery, and I currently have nothing on my Overwhelming Presence. Now I'm going to take you into a Waystone so I can show you some of how this works. So let's get something reasonable. There we go. Chilled Ground's kind of annoying, but it's not going to be too much of a problem. So we're going to do a tier 15 on the way to this tower over here. Oh yeah, look how I set this up. My map device, I like hid it back behind these trees down below, and the portals appear up top. Oh man, it's so cool. Alright, so we have a few enemies. We're gonna throw down our totem. We're gonna leap onto them, and then we're gonna we're gonna Bone Shatter. I killed that guy before I hit him. And you see that the Bone Shatter killed like the entire group of enemies. If there's any stragglers left, the totem could finish them off for us. But anyways, we're gonna throw the totem down again. Leap Slam, Bone Shatter. You see they just die. And this is a tier 15. It happens the same whether it's tier 15, whether it's, you know, tier 17 is like when you have a corrupted map that's also irradiated. So yeah, regardless of how strong the enemies are, they just kind of melt. If you have one enemy left over, you can hit them with the Mace Strike like I just did there. So if you don't want to do the totem and you just feel lazy, it's perfectly fine to just Leap Slam and Bone Shatter enemies. You don't really have to throw the totem down. I just throw it down sometimes because I like having the additional damage there, especially on maps where the mobs have like increased stun threshold. It's nice to throw the totem down first just so you can kind of get them further along to that stun. But yeah, the nice thing about this build is the more enemies there are, the more density there is, the more you're going to just kill everything on the screen. Because you cause a chain reaction with the Bone Shatter, and it just causes a massive explosion. But when there's less enemies, you don't have the enemies for it to chain through, so then it ends up being a little more tedious. So I definitely prefer having large groups of enemies, which is why a lot of times the most efficient thing you can do is to run past the initial groups of enemies and pull multiple enemies together. And this isn't a boss area, so I'll tack a boss fight onto the end of this just so that we have that as well. But as you can see, the build works very well. especially if you make sure that you set up your prime for stun threshold properly. So you want to adjust your gems in your leap slam in order to give it more or less damage in order to get the prime window appropriately. So if we jump onto the enemies and we see that they have the white orb around them, you're doing good. If you don't see that, there's a couple of options. You either are doing too much and they're getting knocked down right away, in which case you need to reduce your damage. Or if you see too little damage and you're not getting either of those things, the prime or knocking them down right away, then you need to increase your damage, and you can do that with either just straight up physical damage, or you can use overpower, which is my go-to usually. And overpower is just going to increase your stun buildup on enemies. Okay, we got a rare mob. So for a rare mob, I like to use my overpower, or not my overpower, my seismic cry, and then just drop the hammer straight down on them, and boom, they die. Oh, this is actually a double, so we'll do it one more time. Boop. Oh, and that was a good example of a rare mob dying because I bone shattered. I didn't even notice the rare mob there at first, and I bone shattered, and hey, we killed it. Alright guys, thanks for watching the video. I'm going to kill these last couple of rare mobs real quick, but I appreciate you guys watching the video. If you have any questions, make sure you leave a comment or stop by my stream at twitch.tv/screenheart. I would definitely appreciate if you guys would drop a like and a comment on the video, just help the algorithm out. But I will see you guys in my next video, and I'm probably going to be working on another build after this one, so stay tuned for that. One last hammer kill. Alright guys, bye.